Welcome to Tramlines, a podcast from Agri. I'm your host, Tony Smith, putting your questions to the experts. Today we are talking about the challenges that farm businesses are facing, with two very difficult years establishing crops and a very dry summer that has put many farm businesses on the breadline. That's the UK, but globally there are record crops. And it isn't just arable enterprises. Livestock have been severely impacted as well. So what can farmers do? To help us with that key question, I'm joined by Lucy Braithwaite-Exley, Scotland Origination Manager with Bunge, and Paul Pickford, Farm Business Consultant. Good morning to you. Let's start off by just examining, as if farmers don't know, but will actually paint the picture. And maybe, Paul, you can start us off. What is actually happening to the farm business right now, following these two very challenging seasons?
Well, thankfully, Tony, we've had actually a very lovely autumn for the first time in 2 years that has enabled farmers to get on and get the job done. And so the crops are largely in now. However, the outlook is not very spectacular. As Lucy will know, the prices are absolutely nailed to the floor. And whilst costs haven't gone on much from last year, costs are still too high as a percentage of output, and therefore the expected cost of production, even with a good year, are probably going to be higher than the output prices that are achievable.
And Paul, that must put farmers in a very difficult position in their businesses.
Yeah, I mean, they've come off the back of two very damaging years. Most arable farmers will have at best broken even this year. A lot will have lost some or a lot of money, and that's probably the second year that's happened in a row. We've had 18 months almost of continuous rain. It doesn't make for straightforward farming conditions.
And Lucy, I know that your focus is up there in Scotland, but also from a global perspective, it's very interesting. Before we came on air, you were talking about what's happening globally. Share a bit of that, if you could.
Yeah, so obviously we've seen smaller crops in the UK, but as a catalyst globally, we've seen large crops across the Northern Hemisphere, which has obviously created this bearish tone in the market. And we're also heading into large harvests in the Southern Hemisphere, also across the Atlantic. The US is harvesting a record-breaking corn crop. So the forecast is to exceed 425 million tonnes, which is well above last year's record of 390 million tonnes. So again, all of these kind of big crops are impacting the global market. Whereas obviously in the UK, although the early yields on oilseed rape and winter barley were strong, unfortunately winter wheat, spring barley and other spring crops did underperform. So yeah, that's where we're seeing the kind of main impact in the UK.
And Lucy, could you just clarify for us? You mentioned those successful harvests elsewhere around the globe. What actually is the impact on us here in the UK?
So it means that globally there is a lot of wheat and corn out there, and consumers, because of this, consumers are continuing to buy hand to mouth, because obviously when the market is drifting lower, why would they take significant cover when the market keep dropping? So kind of nearby, the consumers are remaining cautious, very much buying hand to mouth as the prices steadily decline. And so unless we see a clear catalyst, the sentiment is unlikely to shift. One potential bullish impact could be, so North China is currently experiencing one of the wettest Septembers to mid-October in the past decade. So the rainfall is affecting 90% of the region, and these levels of wetness are comparable to 2021. So the second half of October will be critical for this, not only for wheat plantings, but also prolonging corn harvest delays further. So that is one kind of thing to watch, and the market is watching that. But otherwise, yeah, there is kind of no significant other catalyst at the moment.
And Paul, listening to Lucy's summary of what is happening globally, for the farmer back here in the UK, where do they start when it comes to understanding the farm business in order to make the right decisions?
I think that's right, Tony. I mean, it hasn't changed in all the time that I've been doing this job, which is quite a long time now. You need a plan to get from A to B. the likelihood of arriving at B, well, that'll depend on many factors that are outside of your control. But if you haven't got a plan, you end up at point C. You don't really know whether that was your fault or their fault or whatever. So a clear plan to get from A to B is important, and that in terms of agricultural production is a gross margin. You have to understand what it is you're trying to achieve, and that it's based on being realistic. The important thing to remember when you do a budget is that the chances are it won't be right. It'll be somewhere near right. It may be a long way off right, because factors, the weather, the price of grain, all this completely beyond your control, will drive output. But if you have a budget and you know what you're going to spend, then the support will be available from whoever you bank with, providing all usual parameters on that. And if you're getting to the latter end of the season, and the growing conditions are great and everything's going well, but you're actually a bit short of cash and can't afford to buy the last couple of fungicides, all that investment will be for nothing, because that yield will just melt away. And so the budget is vitally important tool to get the business on the right footing, and get the support of the other people that have to work with you to achieve that end.
Lucy, and how can farmers build in some resilience to these, global markets? What can they do?
Knowing your local markets. So what you might grow a great crop, but if there's no local demand, the cost of haulage can quickly eat into your profits. So it's really vital to talk to your merchants and local consumers and find where the best markets are and what the local buyers are actually wanting.
And so, Paul, asking you as a farm consultant, where would you start in terms of thinking about growing for a specific market? Maybe even a local market for your grain, for example?
It's linking up the genetic potential of the crop with the nutrition and the chemistry that's now available to get the best out of it. The crop you're trying to grow. You're trying to grow a malting barley, or trying to grow a milling wheat, and therefore understanding that market is important, and what those market requirements are is important. So you pick your variety based on that. You then look at that variety and try and understand which is going to be, in your situation, the most economic to grow. Not necessarily the cheapest, because the cheapest doesn't always give you the results. But if you're in a relatively fertile area with strong ground, you won't be growing malting barley, but you will be growing milling wheat. And therefore, are you in the right position to get those into the local mills, as Lucy just pointed out? And can they take that when you want it? But then you've got that, and then also looking at the disease resistance profile, understanding whether you're on the west of the country or the east of the country, which is where your agronomist brings so much value to that decision making process. And at the same time, the nutrition is equally important. Understanding what's currently in your soil, what nutrition you manage to hang on to over the winter. So soil testing, nitrogen testing of tissues, to really understand what you can feed, and in some cases what you get away without feeding, and get the best out of it. And then that then becomes increasingly more complicated as you start to look at the carbon value of it, and whether you can get more benefit from green manures or from bringing organic manures onto the farm as well. And what is the cost of bringing those organic manures onto the farm? Gross margins are a very simple calculation at the outset, that opens the door to a much more complicated and diverse picture, which at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, we have to find a way through, because at the end of that there will be some profit, hopefully.
We are launching an insight report focusing on tackling rising costs with smarter margins. The full report coming soon. If you'd like a copy sent to you, just email your name and address to info@agri.co.uk. Lucy, what else can a farm business do to improve their returns?
Just in terms of that kind of adding value and achieving smarter margins. Again, you can look at different projects out there that can help alongside this. So, for example, the Whitworth Sustainability Project, which I know has been mentioned in a previous podcast, and other pilot projects, whether that's in malting barley or oats or anything, because it's not just about doing the right thing environmentally, it's about unlocking financial rewards for sustainable practices. So obviously reduced tillage, efficient nutrition, cover cropping. These aren't just buzzwords, they're real strategies that can help improve margins. Obviously it's not the whole solution, but it is another smart tool in the toolbox.
Thanks, Lucy. And you mentioned there the word strategies. Paul, is that one way by which we can find a way forward?
Yes, I think I'm sure it is, Tony. Understanding the implications of the changes you make is part of putting together the right strategy for your business. You know where you are, the nature of the soils, the position in the country, who you can sell to, is so important to determine to make sure you actually grow the right crop for your farm. Just because everybody around you is doing something doesn't necessarily make it right, but there's probably a good reason for that. You know, if you live within 20 miles of a mill on good strong dirt and you're not growing milling wheat, there's a question to answer there because everything's set up for you. So that's and the other part of strategy that's so important is understanding when that cash is required. And that is really coming home to roost at the moment because there's an awful lot of farmers with this year's harvest in store and some farmers with some of last year's harvest in store that are actually struggling to find anybody to take it, to find a home for it. As Lucy mentioned, people are buying hand to mouth. Well, if your cash flow, if you've got to pay for your fertilizer next month and you can't shift your corn, then you need to be having conversations very, very quickly with some financial provider to bridge that gap.
Thanks, Paul. And you raise a really serious point there about being able to sell your crop in order to have that cash flow in the business. Lucy, any top tips there that we can learn from?
Well, again, going back to kind of different marketing strategies and options, one thing that growers should maybe look at, especially with the market uncertainty at the moment, is pools. So, for example, Bunge has a wheat tracker pool, which gives a structured approach to marketing. It's not about chasing the top of the market, but it just smooths out the volatility and manages risk in uncertain times. So if you put a percentage of your crop against that pool, you know that you're not locking into a price because, okay, at the moment, you're where the market is, it might be below your cost of production, but you are covering yourself on something. So you're covering yourself on 10, 15, 20% of your crop. You know it's in safe hands, we'll market that for you. And then after harvest, you're going to get a price for it. We're going to move that, and then you will get paid for it. Because again, it's quite easy to kind of focus on where the market is at the moment and go, I don't want to lock into prices now because they are below cost of production, and then before you know it, you've harvested that crop, and the demand in your area is not great at that time, and you've got nowhere to take it. So again, it's kind of locking into something but not fixing a price, so you've still got that flexibility, but you've got a movement option, and also you're going to be paid for that crop. And again, it's, as I said before, it's just engaging with the market, talking to the likes of Paul, your merchants and your farm traders, just to really keep a handle of where the market's going.
And Paul, what are you seeing in terms of trends of the way farmers are approaching finding those markets?
A significant increase in some farmer selling. So I'm involved in the business in Somerset. We sell quite a lot of grain locally to poultry producers. I was with some guys last week who've just done a deal to supply basically for the next 6 months a fairly constant stream of milling wheat into that mill. They're having these conversations, and it's opens up more opportunities. And yeah, and also if it's a 20-mile haul, and it gets there and something's gone wrong with it, it's only 20 miles away. If it's gone to the East Coast from the West Coast, the costs involved in the reality of it, it's going to be tipped somewhere out of your control. And that I think for a lot of farmers causes an awful lot of pain. Whereas if it's 10, 15 miles away, and you can see it, you can always bring it back and send it off and get it cleaned or whatever. And it's trying to bring back into your hands as much control as you possibly can, so you're reducing the risks to which you're exposed.
And Lucy, obviously you're spending a lot of time working in Scotland there. What trends and changes are you noticing?
Well, in Scotland, actually, this year it is an example. We are seeing a big shift. So distilling and brewing demand it is massively down. It's been so combined with a big carryover from crop 24, and also a big enough crop from 2025 and less demand. We've seen a huge knock-on effect on the spring barley prices, especially in Scotland. So we're seeing a huge shift into increased oilseed rape plantings, because again, we saw almost record yields in Scotland, especially on oilseed rape. And so growers have seen that actually that the distilling market is down. So why would they put as much spring barley in as they have been? I mean, we're seeing continuous spring barley growers in Aberdeenshire now. They've put some rapeseed in, or they're putting wheat in, just to find a different market, because the distilling sector is kind of under pressure at the moment. So again, growers are making decisions to grow different crops and looking at different marketing options, as well as with oats as well. We're seeing a lot of oats going in, and also more rye for the AD plants. So yeah, there's definitely a shift in cropping rotations because of a knock-on effect of the market at the moment.
And whilst we should spend so much longer talking about this critical area, what would be your top tips that you would urge those managing their farm businesses to think about?
Yeah, no, well, I would just say, I mean, whether it's choosing the right crop, tapping into buybacks, or leveraging sustainability programs, the goal is the same. It's about achieving those smarter margins, which gives you better resilience and a more strategic approach to farming, and keeping that conversation open with your advisors. So Agri, Bunge, Paul, myself, your farm traders, and just really kind of keeping those conversations going and helping everybody understand your business.
And Paul, what are your thoughts?
I think there are times when you have to step away from your happy place out on the farm, get into the office, sit down, and do the hard yards. Knowing you can go back out to the happy place in the afternoon, get in there, sit down, and understand what it is you're doing. It's just absolutely, and it becomes more and more important as things become difficult, and actually harder to do as well. So we're not starting at the easy time, we're starting at the difficult time. But step away from the happy place, get in the office, look at what the business needs, and then pick up the phone and talk to Lucy, talk to me, talk to people like us, and the solutions will be there. But the sooner you have the conversation, the more solutions are available to you. The longer you leave it, the fewer options you have.
Thank you, Lucy and Paul. And don't forget to download your copy of Agri's recently launched Insight Report. Do stay tuned here on Tramlines, with episodes here to support you and your farming business. If you have any questions for our experts that you would like answered, email them in to info@agri.co.uk. That's it for this podcast, but do tune in again as we meet the experts throughout the season, exploring the many immediate and longer-term questions for growers and farmers in the UK. See you next time.